Hi, everybody. We are going to discuss the reproductive system. We are starting with reproductive system for male, and our next part one will be focused on the female reproductive system. So for the male reproductive system, you have what we identified as the primary sex organs, which is also referred to as the gonads. In case of male, that would be the testes, where the sperm is produced, and you also have what you identify as accessory glands. These glands, accessory organs, which include glands. That in case of male, there's three types. We have the prostate gland, which we talked previously in the urinary system, located inferior of the bladder. We have the bulbourethral gland, which is connected to the urethra, and the seminal vesicle, which sits posterior to the bladder. And we'll show you guys in the picture where these are specifically located with a brief overview of their function. In terms of the organs, we also have the external genitalia, and again, we'll talk about that in more detail as we go through the PowerPoint. So starting with the testes. So testes are important because they're responsible for production of the sex cells, which in this case would be sperm. And they're also responsible for maintaining and developing the secondary sex characteristics by releasing hormone testosterone. So secondary characteristics would be things like deeper voice in male, larger muscle mass, higher blood cell production, more body hair, etc. In terms of the testes, there is a double layer membrane, again, kind of going back to that serous membrane or serous sac, which is called the tunica vaginalis. So here is the tunica vaginalis, if you're following it on the picture. Here is one layer, here's the second layer. So this is your double layer called tunica vaginalis. So that is what encloses the testes and the tubular network called the seminiferous tubules. I'll talk about that in just a second as well. Now, when we look at the testes, and you can see it in the picture again as well, you see that kind of the fibrous capsule that is found inside the testes. That's the white color again that is depicted in this picture. This fibrous capsule is called tunica albugina, and it is broken your testes to about 250 to 300 lobules. So basically you're going to have a small segmentation. So this is one lobule, this is another lobule, and again, you have about 250 to 300 of them per testes. Now, within these lobules, and you can see this, you can see these coils of tubes inside the lobules, and these are referred to as the seminiferous tubules. Now, seminiferous tubules are extremely important because they would be the location for the sperm production. So if I ask you guys a question as identifying the organ responsible for sperm production, then your answer would be the testes. However, the question specifically says where's the location within the testes where these sperm production takes place. Your answer should be seminiferous tubules. And the other aspect of these seminiferous tubules is that they do contain blood testis barrier. So basically, again, you don't want to expose these reproductive cells to many of the components that are freely floating inside the blood. So you do create a barrier between these cells and the capillary network to make sure that no harm can come to these cells. The picture right here shows a cross-section of the seminiferous tubules. So if you take one of these tubules, pull it out, and then cut it, and this is the cross-section. And basically what you see as these circles going around within the seminiferous tubules, they are a sperm at different stages of development. Now, within the testes, you will actually have two different type of cells. One type of cells that are called interstitial cells of Leydig, and the other ones are called Sertoli cells. So what is the difference between these two? So interstitial cells of Leydig are cells that are located between the seminiferous tubules, and the goal of these cells is to produce testosterone. So if you don't know what testosterone is, the male sex hormone, right? And it does a lot more in the body. So all of those secondary sex characteristics we mentioned earlier, they are associated again with the production of the testosterone. The other type of cells that we have are called Sertoli cells. And these are nursing cells or substanticular cells. They are the ones that are going to make sure that no harm is coming into the regular cells found in the testes, responsible for production of the sperm. So they're the one that form the blood-testis barrier, and they also support any sperm that is undergoing development. So going back, here are your interstitial cells, these cells right here, and your sustenticular cells are these cells right here. So in terms of a sperm development, what do you need to know? So we have discussed meiosis, mitosis in very brief terminology earlier in the semester. Meiosis is another form of cell division, which is associated with sex cells only, where you still divide your genetic information. The main difference is that this genetic information will eventually be placed inside the sperm in terms of male, and in terms of female will be placed inside an oocyte, where half of the genetic information of each of the sex cells contribute to the development of what we identified as a zygote, which is a fertilized egg. So that basically forms the next generation. So again, meiosis can only be used for the sex cells, and each of the sex cells will only carry half the genetic information, half from the paternal side, coming from the sperm, and the oocyte will carry the other half of the genetic information from the maternal side. Now, the process of development of the sperm is referred to as spermatogenesis. These are morphological, basically changes in the shape of the sperm as it undergoes the development inside the seminiferous tubules. It takes about 64 days to actually produce a mature sperm, and this sperm can survive up to 3 days as they introduce into the female reproductive system. Here is the stages of the sperm development. I don't expect you guys to know any major details about this, as far as you understand that the development of a sperm is associated with meiosis, and the process itself is called spermatogenesis, spermiogenesis. Now, what is the path that a sperm takes as it goes through the male reproductive system and enters into the female reproductive system? So we already talked about the beginning process where the sperms actually start to produce. These are these coils that is depicted in yellow called the seminiferous tubules. Now notice that seminiferous tubules are emptying into these smaller branches right here. So these branches right here, these are called testes, which begin collects the sperms from the seminiferous tubules. They then themselves dump their sperm or transfer the sperm into this network of tubules, which are referred to as the efferent vacuoles. Efferent vacuoles transfer these sperms to another set of tubules that you can see, forming a structure called the epididymis. So epididymis is this whole structure you have right here. This is the epididymis, and it is where sperm gains the ability to swim and fertilize an egg. Going from there, it transfers the sperm to another structure, which is a very long tube, and that circles around the bladder called vas deferens or ductus deferens. And from there, it empties into the ejaculatory duct. And from there, it transfers through the three parts of the urethra and eventually exits the body. So let's go ahead and go through each of these structures one at a time. So seminiferous tubules produce the sperm, and we are moving on to the epididymis. So epididymis is about 6 millimeter long, 6 centimeters long, sorry, not millimeters. I apologize, 6 meter long in terms of the coils, the tubes that are present inside the epididymis. So what we're talking about is all of these coils right here. If they unravel, then they would be about 6 meters, which is about 18 feet. They are lined with the cells called pseudostratified columnar epithelium. This should sound familiar to you since we already have discussed them multiple times in our previous lectures. The journey of the sperm through epididymis typically takes about 20 days, and two major changes happens here. As I mentioned earlier, first the sperm learns or gains the ability to swim, and the second ability is ability to fertilize an oocyte. Now, if the sperm is not utilized or it's not ejaculated, it can be stored within the structure for up to 2 weeks. However, if it is not used within those 2 weeks, it does get broken down and degrades, and the materials get recycled. So here in this picture, moving on. So the testis produced the sperm within the tube called seminiferous tubules. It passed it to the comma-like structure, which is your epididymis. In epididymis, your sperm learned to swim and fertilize an egg. And now it can continue its path through this tube, which is referred to as the vas deferens or ductus deferens. Notice this tube goes around the bladder. So here's the bladder. It goes on top of the bladder and comes to the posterior aspect of the bladder, where it merges with the first of the three accessory glands called the seminal vesicle. So seminal vesicle is the structure that basically allows the sperm to eventually transfer out of the body. The main structure or main characteristic of the ductus deferens, which is not listed here, is that the ductus deferens also has a smooth muscle that creates peristaltic motion, which basically means the same type of motion we saw in our digestive system to propel the food forward. You will see something similar to this in the vas deferens, where the sperm gets to move through the tubules using the contraction of the smooth muscle. And again, when it gets to the back of the or the posterior aspect of the urinary bladder, it merges through the seminal vesicle and connects to a tube called the ejaculatory duct, which is the tube you see right there, called again ejaculatory duct. Now, as it passes through the ejaculatory duct, it goes through the last part of the process, which is the passing through the urethra. So in this picture, you can see the tree breakdown of the urethra. So again, it's clearly labeled, but I'm just gonna walk you guys through this. So up here is your bladder, okay? Right underneath the bladder, you have the prostate gland. So here's the prostate gland, sorry. Here's the prostate gland. And here's the penis, basically. So here is the testes. This is the epididymis. Epididymis passes the sperms through the vas deferens, which is the tube you see right here, which connects to the seminal vesicle and passes through the prostate glands as what? As ejaculatory duct, which is this tube right here. Ejaculatory duct is going to join, yes, it's going to join this tube right here, which is urethra basically. So here is the urethra coming off of the bladder. And now your ejaculatory duct and the urethra are merging with each other. So at this point, the urethra is going to receive a name called prostatic urethra because it's passing through the prostate. Then as it continues to go down, here, right here is your membrane, it's the urogenital membrane. So as it passes through this membrane, this becomes this little tiny part of it. Let me just change my color so you guys can see it better. I think it's not cooperating, sorry guys. As it passes through the urogenital, it becomes the membranous urethra. And then at the end, what you have is the last part of the urethra, which is going through the length of the penis, which is this whole structure right here called the penile or spongy urethra. So working, and again, if I ask you guys, write the path of a sperm through the reproductive system, you start with the seminiferous tubules of the testes, which passes to the efferent testes, then efferent to the epididymis, vas deferens to the ejaculatory duct to the prostate urethra or prostatic urethra, to the membranosus urethra, and to the penile urethra and out of the body. So that's the path of urine. But we also, the path of sperm, which is also shared with urine actually. But we also mentioned 3 accessory glands. Reminding you of those 3 names was seminal vesicle, which was posterior to the bladder. We have the prostate gland, which sits inferior to the urinary bladder, and bulbourethral gland, which is inferior to the prostate gland. So right here, you can see the 3 glands again. These 2 bodies right here and right here are the seminal vesicles. The structure right here is the prostate gland, and these 2 tiny circles, as the name implies, bulbal as bulbous, circular, urethral glands are 2 tiny accessory glands of the male reproductive system. So what are the seminal vesicles? They're bilateral. You have 2 of them on the posterior aspect of the bladder. The most important function of the seminal vesicle is that it produces about 60% of the volume of what we identify as semen during ejaculation. So understand that about 5 to 10% of what gets released during ejaculation is actually identified as a sperm. The rest of them, or the rest of the fluid, is associated with the seminal vesicle and prostate gland, adding material to ensure the sperm survival in the female reproductive system, and also its ability to effectively swim and fertilize an egg. So what is the job of the seminal vesicle? Seminal vesicle, first of all, releases about 60% of the volume of the semen, and it includes a type of sugar referred to as fructose. So the job of the fructose is to provide nutrition for the sperm as the sperm swims through the reproductive system to ensure basically that it has nutrients and has the capacity to use that nutrients to produce energy and effectively swim its way through the reproductive system. It also contains material that enhances the chance of fertilization for those sperms. So it is not just the fluid that gets released, it actually providing nourishment as well as increasing the chance of that sperm fertilizing an egg. Again, they are bilateral, so these two structures are right here and right here. Prostate glands. We already talked about prostate gland in terms of urinary system. So this is a review of what we discussed before in terms of location. So prostatic urethra runs through the prostate gland. We already discussed that as well. The size of the prostate under normal conditions is about the size of a chestnut. So it is relatively small unless it is enlarged in males of age 50 and up. It does release about 25 to 30% of what we identified as semen. So 60% comes from the seminal vesicles, and the remaining fluid comes from the prostate gland. Why does the prostate gland releases those fluid? The main goal is to enhance the sperm motility as it introduced into the female reproductive system to ensure that it can basically swim through the female reproductive system and have the ability to fertilize the egg. So motility of the sperm is an extremely essential factor for the ability of a male being able to fertilize a female. Last gland that we have in this structure is inferior to the prostate gland. It is a small organ referred to as the bulbourethral gland. It is important to note that it releases an alkaline or basic solution right before the ejaculation. And this fluid is essential for cleaning the urethra prior to ejaculation and neutralizes the acidic environment of the urethra created by urine. It also enhances the pH for fertilization as the sperm is introduced into the female reproductive system. So one thing that should already be very clear to you, as we have talked about the urethra, in case of male systems, the urethra is shared both for the urinary system as well as the reproductive system. However, you do need to know that if the sperm is released into the urethra without the urethra being cleaned from the residues of urine, those acidic residues of urine can actually cause damage to the sperm and decrease its fertilization chance. So to ensure that is not happening, right prior to ejaculation, the alkaline solution released from the bulbourethral gland cleans the urethra, and again enhancing the chance of fertilization. Next, what we have is the penis. Penis is the external genitalia, which is, the scrotum and penis together forms the external genitalia in a male. It is made up of mostly erectile tissue, what you can see in blue color. This is, if you look at a transverse cut of the penis, you can see two large bodies on the dorsal aspect of the penis, and these are referred to as the corpus cavernosa if we're talking about both of them, and if you're talking about one of them, it would be corpus cavernosum, and they are located again in the dorsal or posterior aspect of the penis. And then the smaller of the three bodies is corpus spongiosum, which you can see right here. This is on the anterior surface of the penis, and it is it is wrapped around the urethra. Because of the name spongiosum, it also allows the urethra to receive a name called a spongy urethra. So the last part of the urethra can either be called penile or a spongy urethra. For the penis, we also have the enlarged tip of the penis, referred to as the glans penis. And there is the foreskin that covers the tip of the penis called prepuce. This is the part of the skin that gets removed during the process of circumcision. A scrotum is the skin that is wrapped around the testes in terms of protection. A very important fact about the scrotum is that it is staying away from the surface of the body. It places the testes lower than the body, and this is essential because an appropriate environment for the testes to produce a sperm is about 3 degrees cooler than your actual body temperature, which is about 34 degrees centigrade. The scrotum is responsible for keeping the testes away from the body and keeping it in a cool environment, ensuring the sperm production is effective. The muscle that is wrapped around the testes underneath the scrotum is called the cremaster muscles, and these muscles allow for the elevation of the testes during ejaculation. These skeletal muscles form extends to form the internal oblique muscles that are responsible for elevation of the testes. And you can see it in these pictures again. So here is the testes and epididymis, and covering that surface would be the cremaster's muscle. We already talked about this picture in detail. I would like you guys to go through the structures, everything that we have discussed in terms of tubes, in terms of the structures and organs. You are responsible to be able to identify on the picture and also associate with, provide an associated function. So that's about it for our male reproductive system. We will continue our next PowerPoint with the female reproductive system.